welcome to NWAVet Presents. Today we're going to be taking a look at the infamous Nexus Letter. If you've had any dealings with the VA compensation system, you have likely heard of a Nexus Letter. People treat the Nexus Letter like a silver bullet to cut through VA red tape. Did you get denied for your disability? You'll hear people say, get a doctor to write a Nexus Letter. Or all you need is a Nexus Letter. Or just have the doctor write a letter that the condition is related to service. With all of the hyperbole and misinformation, what is the truth about Nexus Letters? And why do doctors on the internet advertise that they'll write one for $500, $1,000, or more? And why do most doctors not even want to touch Nexus Letters? First of all, what is a Nexus Letter? Well, let's start by answering a question that comes up. What exactly is a nexus? A nexus is a link. You can think of it as a connection or a relationship. Remember, there are 3 requirements in order for the VA to award compensation. You have to have the diagnosis of a current disability. In other words, there is something currently that is wrong with you, some type of disability, be that mental, physical, whatever. There's got to be something going on. The second thing you have to have is an incident that happened in service that you believe caused the disability or the problem that you are currently experiencing. And finally, there must be a link or a relationship. We call it a nexus between the two. There is a nexus between what is currently going on and what happened while you were in service. In other words, you must be able to link your current illness or injury back to something that occurred while you were in service. You've got a problem today, say with your elbow, and 5 years ago, while you were in service, you were trying to catch a heavy weight and your arm overextended and somehow it broke your elbow or it injured your elbow. And the doctor told you at the time that you were probably going to have continuing problems with it. And ever since you've been out of service over the past 2 years, you've been continuing to seek treatment for it. Well, there is your incident in service. You broke your elbow. Your diagnosis today, it is continuing to give you issues with extension. And the link or the relationship between the two is you have continued to seek medical care since you got out of service trying to get it fixed. The VA can trace your medical records back and see that you have visited the doctor several times over the last 2 years since you got out of service, showing a record and showing that there is something there. The pain you have in your elbow most likely occurred when you broke it in service. So, thus the nexus. Now, where we have the nexus go wrong or where we start having problems getting a link is when you've been out of service for a while, over a year or two, and you're trying to get compensated for a disability that you say came from service, and yet there is absolutely no linkage between today and service. You've never gone to the doctor for it. You've never been seen for it. You've just said, I'm fine, I'll suck it up. Well, in that case, you're going to have a problem showing to the VA that it has continued to give you problems up to today. So this is where we talk about a Nexus Letter. What is a Nexus Letter? A Nexus Letter usually will come from a doctor who is competent in the field, i.e. an oncologist would write a Nexus Letter for cancer, a psychologist would write a Nexus Letter for mental health, etc., etc. It's going to need to be from a doctor who is well-versed, who is very competent in the particular disability you're asking about, and is going to be able to give an informed opinion. A Nexus Letter will include sound reasoning, why the disability was more likely than not caused by military service. It's not enough for the doctor to just write down In my professional opinion, I believe Private Snuffy's torn ligament in his left leg is due to the ruck march that he took 10 years ago when he was in the Army. Well, that's all well and good, but show me the proof. Show me the medical research that backs you up. Show me that you have taken Private Snuffy's medical records from when he was in service and are able to go from them to today and show a link between the two. It requires knowledge of the veteran's service treatment records, as well as specialized knowledge of the disability, and may include, usually should include, research and published journal articles. In other words, the doctor will most likely either have to do research on his own or know of research or published articles dealing specifically with that injury and dealing with it coming from something that happened in service. Some of the places we see this, say a veteran was stationed at, one of the big ones these days is Fort McClellan. It's known that Fort McClellan held a lot of the chemicals that are present in Agent Orange. And then there were other chemical sites outside of the fort, on the other side of the fence. And you have veterans come up with cancers and say, well, I was at Fort McClellan and they were holding all this stuff that is used to make Agent Orange. And Agent Orange, Vietnam veterans are getting compensation for cancer from Agent Orange. So I was on this base. I was around these chemicals that when they're combined make Agent Orange, so I should be getting compensation for my cancer. Well, that sounds real good. And, to any just typical person on the street, the connection seems to be there. However, it would take actual medical research, scientific research, published findings showing that the different chemicals that were held in Fort McClellan leaked out enough, and that in the concentrations they can cause cancer in somebody. It would take a lot of research and a lot of scientific evidence to back that kind of a link up. So, you're starting to see why there's problems with Nexus Letters. The second thing, Nexus Letters for secondary disabilities. Have you heard of people asking for, say, compensation for TMJ secondary to PTSD, or PTSD secondary to tinnitus, or sleep apnea secondary to PTSD? All of these are secondary disabilities that people try to file with the VA asking for compensation. Now the problem is a lot of times you're not going to have a clear link between, say, PTSD and sleep apnea. When you talk about sleep apnea, you're talking about a breathing issue. When you're talking about PTSD, you're talking about a mental health issue. So when you deal with Nexus Letters for secondary disabilities, there may be very, very few, if any, medical studies that have ever been done on it. People come up with these ideas, I'm going to link this to this, and in their head, the way they're thinking, it makes absolute sense. But to a medical doctor, the actual physiological, biological processes that would link the two together just don't exist. So with little medical evidence to back up the theory, it's questionable if it's going to fly. It would definitely require a lot of research. Not on your part, on the part of the doctor, because what you're asking the doctor to do is be able to show not 100% proof, but really sound reasoning that X is related to Y. Remember, the VA is wanting medical evidence. They're wanting something that they can hang their hats on and say, okay, this makes sense. So, and like I said, normally that comes from a competent doctor. And honestly, doctors just do not have that kind of time, or are not going to take that kind of time to do the research that would try and link, say, sleep apnea to PTSD. So we've dealt with regular Nexus Letters. We've dealt with secondary Nexus Letters for secondary issues. And then you have lay Nexus Letters, or what we call buddy letters. Okay? Don't dismiss the possibility of these. No, it's not from a doctor. As I've said, most disabilities will require the evidence to come from a medical doctor. However, there are instances when a lay letter will work. If the disability is one which can be observed and explained sufficiently by a lay person with no medical knowledge, then sometimes a lay letter will work. Example, sleep apnea. That's the one we work with a lot. Private Joe Snuffy may not have ever been diagnosed with sleep apnea while in service. But 2 years after getting out of service, he's diagnosed with sleep apnea. He remembers that while he was deployed to Afghanistan, his bunkmates always told him that he was snoring throughout the night, and that they would have to actually every once in a while wake him up or listen to see if he was still breathing, because it sounded like he stopped breathing in the middle of the night. Well, these are classic signs of sleep apnea. And so if Private Snuffy can get 2 or 3 of his battle buddies that were downrange with him to write a letter giving their name, the unit they were in, when they were deployed, and that they were deployed with Private Snuffy, and these are the things that they noticed regarding his sleep, well, then there's a greater chance that the VA will take this as evidence that obviously he had the signs of sleep apnea during service. Okay, let's take a look at getting a Nexus letter. How do we go about getting one? Well, many doctors will refuse to write one. Like I said, often they take a lot of time for research, which doctors don't just have. Sometimes it may be an issue of integrity. And let's be honest about it. You're wanting the Nexus letter in order to get money from the VA. And if the doctor puts his name down there and signs it, he's opening himself up to possible lawsuits. Okay? Possibility of losing his medical license. Most doctors are not willing to go this route and do this. That's why a lot of people go with online doctors or through disability lawyers who have connections with doctors. A couple of problems with this. First of all, they charge exorbitant fees. Like I said, $500, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 for a Nexus letter. And generally, especially if you're dealing with disability lawyers, that first consult's going to be free, because they're going to look at your case and they're going to tell you the only way they get paid is if you win. But remember, this is how they make their money. If they look at your case and say, well, I don't think we can do it, they're not going to take it, because they're in it for the money. They're not in it for your disability claim. So if you go that direction, you're taking a chance that they're going to help you and that they're going to be able to. How do you get a Nexus letter? It's not impossible. Well, it's not impossible for some issues. I would have to say there are some where it probably would be impossible to get. But if you genuinely believe that your disability is service-connected, you are absolutely convinced of it, this is when you have to get to work. You have to research the condition and how it may have been linked to service, both now and in the past. See if anyone else has ever got it linked to service. If so, you may want to contact them and find out how they did it. It may take exhaustive research to find evidence, days, weeks, months, even years of research to learn exactly what you're dealing with, to learn all of the functions of it, to figure out how it could be connected with anything you did in service. And not just what Bob down the street thinks, what scientifically, medically makes sense. If you can find that evidence, if you can catalog it, if you can put it all together so it makes a full picture, share that with your doctor. Let them have time to look at it, see if they agree. Possibly they will, and will be able to write a Nexus letter based on that. In the end, remember this. This is your claim. It's not your brother's, it's not your mom or dad's, it's not your doctor's. It's your claim. There's nobody who's going to fight for it harder than you will. If you believe that there's a service connection, it is going to be up to you to do the research and attempt to make it fit before you try and go to the doctor and say, this is when I believe this is what it is. Well, I hope that gave you a little bit of information on Nexus Letters. Like always, you can find us online at NWAVet.org, or you can follow us on Facebook at NWAVet. We hope to see you there. In the meantime, y'all take care of each other. This is NWAVet out.